of Joseph we read in the Maftir as Lucas echoed words across generations. And Joseph lived to 110 years, and Joseph saw the grandchildren of his son Ephraim and of Manasseh. The image that this year pops out at me for the first time in reading the Torah is how that sentence acknowledges the importance of generations after, children, grandchildren, and in that case, great-grandchildren as well. Just like Lucas is privileged to have as his name a name of a great-grandparent, the possibility of that connection across generations is profound. Likewise, in our earlier Torah reading, Jacob, nearing the end of his life, blesses his grandsons, blessings that we repeat traditionally every Friday night at our Shabbat table. May you be like Manasseh and Ephraim. May you be like my grandsons. Not sons, but in its original context, the power of a grandparent to influence and shape an identity to grandchildren and across generations. I have on my mind the importance of that connection because of a TV show that I watched this last week, that of Harvard professor Henry Louis Gates Jr., Finding Your Roots on PBS. I don't know if you've seen that show. It's extraordinarily well done, where usually famous people are the focus of both genealogy and DNA research to trace their roots. I watched one show in particular this last week with Dustin Hoffman, the great Ratso Rizzo, the great actor of The Graduate, one of the great actors of our day, and Mia Farrow, who was a counterpoint. There's usually two different people who are examined. Dustin Hoffman's story was that his parents had come to Hollywood totally cut off from any family history. Not just family history in terms of knowing his grandparents, let alone great-grandparents, but even his Jewish roots. Although his mother and father were both Jewish, when they moved to Hollywood, as he said, they wanted to create a new life for themselves, a life marked by sunshine, entertainment, accumulation, but one bereft of religious identity and family identity. When Mia Farrow finished learning about certain of her ancestors that she didn't know about through this genealogical research, she said with tears, "I see myself as the accumulation of all those experiences and the courage of those ancestors in my past." And with tears said, "Whatever I do, I want to make them proud." When Henry Louis Gates asked Dustin Hoffman about his own takeaways, he said he had known nothing about his grandfather, grandmother, and great-grandfather. What that story was is those ancestors were left behind in a young communist Russia. And his father's father in the early 1930s had gone back behind the Iron Curtain in order to try and get his parents out. The research indicated that not only was his grandfather, Frank, killed by the communist police, but when his father, who he was trying to get out, went to check on his son, he too was killed. And his grandmother, his father's mother, was put into prison in Siberia She would survive, but with the loss of a limb, and then make her way to Argentina and ultimately to the United States. Dustin Hoffman knew none of this family history. Apparently his father, who was only about 9 when his father left on this mission to try and get his parents out, felt as if that was a painful loss that he closed off. So when Henry Louis Gates said to Dustin Hoffman, "What's your takeaway from learning your family history?" he too welled up with tears and said, "I am a Jew. I am a Jew." The notion that he had those deep roots, Jewish roots, he knew he was Jewish, but the sense that his family had been killed in part due to the anti-Semitism of that regime, and that they had had the courage to go at great risk to save family, for him was a deep bond to grandparents and great-grandparents. There's a book by Bruce Feiler called The Secrets of Happy Families. One of the secrets that he notes in this about how to raise children is the importance of telling family stories. A study done in 2002 at Emory University, in which a husband-wife psychology team found that in looking at September 11th, 2001, to see who was most resilient, who was most, on psychological testing, well-adjusted and happy, they found that the greatest correlation was how much family history children knew. For to know one's roots is to, in fact, be grounded, to indeed feel a quality of resiliency. Your great-grandfather, Moshe, for whom you are named Lucas, was a Holocaust survivor. And as your family told me, he was not a big man physically, but a man of enormous courage and strength. To know that your family chose that name for you, Lucas, and when you were called to the Torah today, was to take his life and mark continuity and celebration and more. The blessing that you hold to live your life with that quality, that inner strength, is the blessing embedded in your name. And so I share with the grandparents that are here, and some great-grandparents if there are, I want to emphasize your opportunity to make an impact on your grandchildren. My mother grew up telling me stories about somebody who I never met, her father, Mordechai Shmuel. She told me those stories with tears in his eyes about his wisdom, his piety, and his tragic loss. That grandfather shaped me as much as anybody I ever met, although I never met him. If you're privileged to have grandchildren, tell them the stories about where you come from. Let them know who their great-grandparents were. If you don't tell them, who else will know? And tell them your stories. For indeed, part of each of our gifts, wherever our families may come from, those legacies of lives lived with grit, of lives lived sometimes with great mistakes, are the fodder of resiliency and more, the gift of life. Ribono Shel Olam, Medor Ledor, we said today as the Torah was passed from generation to generation, may we who are the older generation know the impact we may have on the generations after us by our stories. And may you who are the youth among us be curious and know your blessings, sometimes embedded in name, but always embedded in who you are, a funneling of life